Hey, hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing all of the books going into 2022 that I have not read yet. So this is a pretty simple video concept. My goal is to go through the piles of books that I have not read yet, so my physical TBR, and just kind of hold them up and talk to you briefly about some quick things that I know about them. I might not go super in depth with all of them, but I at least want to give some kind of what I think they're going to be about. I want to look back at this video at the end of 2022, and I want to see how many of these I have crossed off my list, how many of these I have read, how many of them I still need to read. I believe where I'm at, I currently have 42 books on my TBR, so that's between physical and audiobooks, and then I have about 10 to 12 arcs. I want this to be from the beginning of January, so I have read 2 books on this stack, and I will start with those 2 first because I want to see how much I've read this entire year, even though it is the 15th of the month already. But we're going to start with physical books, and then we'll go into audiobooks, and then we will go into all of my arcs. So starting out with the 2 that I have currently read. I read Echoes and Empires by Morgan Rhodes. This is a YA dystopian fantasy type story about a young girl whose father used to be the prime minister of this land, and magic is outlawed, banned, it is considered something very bad, very horrible. I bought this book because Morgan Rhodes wrote the Fallen Kingdom series, and I really enjoyed that one, so I wanted to try out her newest thing. When a thief comes into the kingdom during this gala and accidentally puts this type of magic into her, so she believes that she can't go to the queen to talk about the magic because it's outlawed so heavily, and the guy wants the magic back from her, so they kind of go on this journey together. I will talk more about this in my wrap up at the end of the month. Next, I have read Age of Assassins, but I've also bought in the trilogy Blood of Assassins and King of Assassins, and while we're talking about R.J. Barker, I also own The Bone Ships. I'm hoping to buy the next 2 in this trilogy and read all 6 of these books, they're backwards, all 6 of these books this year. So I have read Age of Assassins and I really enjoyed it. It is the story of an assassin boy whose master gets called into the palace to protect the king-to-be, so the prince of the land, from being assassinated. And this has one of my favorite tropes of all time, which is poor person has to pretend to be rich or royalty or infiltrate court for some reason, and it's about him trying to figure out who is trying to assassinate the prince and why they're trying to assassinate the prince, and also there is lots of magic and death. Now I've got to figure out where to put all of these once I'm done talking about them. Up next, I am currently reading The Two-Faced Queen by Nick Martell. This is the sequel to Kingdom of Liars. I don't know how many books are going to be in this series, but this is the only other one that is published so far. I am about 60 pages into it, and I'm reading it with my book club. Kingdom of Liars has a really complex magic system, so people who can use magic, if they use it untrained, start to lose memories and start to lose abilities of how to do things. And we are following our main character, Michael, who is a dumbass, and his father was considered a traitor to the kingdom a few years ago for having killed the king-to-be. Michael's family now lives in shame. Michael is trying to prove his father was innocent. Next up, we have Whispers of Shadow and Flame, which is the sequel to Song of Blood and Stone, and also I own Cry of Metal and Bone. I am 2 chapters into this book at the current time we are speaking. I actually started it and then got really confused and put it down because I didn't realize that this series, I believe it's a quartet, was going to be a bunch of standalone books in the same universe. So they all take place at the same exact time, but each one follows a different couple, and I didn't know that. So I put it down to read a few other things because it wasn't what I was in the mood for, and I'm going to be picking it back up later this week, and then I am excited to continue on with this one. In this world, we are following 2 nations on the brink of war. Book 1, we are following Jack and Jasminda. Book 2, we are following Kiara and Darvin, and Kira is an assassin, a magical assassin, and Darvin is a military soldier. I don't know how their stories are going to interact with each other, but I'm really excited to find out more. Next, I have The Great Hunt, and I will be buying all of this series this year, but this is the only one that I own so far that I have not read. I'm really excited to be picking this up. This is the sequel to The Eye of the Worlds, which is part of the Wheel of Time series. So this is Robert Jordan's epic high fantasy coming of age story about this young boy who a horrible incident happens in his hometown and a magical woman saves him at the last second, and she, along with him and a few other people, have to go on this journey to try and keep the town safe because they believe that the town is only coming for some of the boys, but they don't know which boy the town is being destroyed for. That was a really weird way to say that. Book 1 wrapped up really nicely. I don't know where book 2 is going to be going, but I am excited to be picking it up and seeing where this 14-book series is headed. Master Artificer is the sequel to Master of Sorrows by Justin Call. The book 1 was about this boy named Anev who is training at this magical school to kill and hunt anyone who can use magic, and he himself can use magic and he is keeping it hidden. I have been told that this series is going to be a villain arc series. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm really excited to see where book 2 goes. I also don't know how many books are going to be in this series, but this is the only other one that has been published so far. I am also very upset because I thought I ordered matching sets online, and apparently I did not. Next up, I have Dance of a Burning Sea, which is the sequel to Song of the Forever Rains. This is also another standalone series, so we are following 3 sisters. Each book is about a different sister's love interest, so it is a fantasy romance storyline, and book 2 is about a pirate lord, and our main girl has the ability to use magic through dance. Next, I have the Atlas 6. I actually don't really know a ton about this. It was kind of a quick, I keep seeing this on TikTok buy, and now it is getting a cover redone because it was bought, I believe, by Tor, and honestly the hardback is gorgeous, but I am really happy with this cover as well. I know that we're going to have 6, I believe it's 6, well it says the Atlas 6, so let's go with 6 people coming together to fight for a slot in this higher education magic wielding group. Like, I think it's something like there's 6 of them, but only 5 of them can continue on, and so they're all going to have to compete against each other to figure out who can get those slots. One thing that really drew me into this book is that there are these sections, and I believe that each section is told by a different character, because at the beginning of the section there's an illustration of one of our different characters, and I find books with illustrations to be so wonderful. Next, I have The Final Girls Support Group by Grady Hendrix. This is a horror book. It is very short. I haven't read any of his works, and I'm a little bit on the fence actually to think if maybe I even want to read this one. I'll say it right now. The more and more I hear about it, the less and less interested I become in it. So I would not be shocked at the end of the year if I have decided to unhaul this book without having read it. This is the story of final girls forming a support group. So a final girl is a girl who is very innocent and pure, who is being hunted by a serial killer and managed to outlive the serial killer. I believe she is the one who actually ended up killing the serial killer that was hunting her. So we have a bunch of girls who have gone through different incidences like that and have formed a support group together. So once a month, no matter what, they meet together and discuss the trauma that they've been through. And then suddenly one day, someone starts killing off these final girls, and it's about them trying to figure out who's killing them and what's going on. I just haven't heard great things about this book, and I know that the audiobook is really not great at all. Like, everyone who listens to the audio is like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't listen to it. It's like overacted. I really do prefer to read horror through audiobook, but I picked up the physical one instead because I just really love this cover and I thought it sounded interesting. But the more and more I hear about it, the less and less I want to read it. The Unspoken Name by A.K. Larkwood. We are following a woman who, I don't know who she is at the beginning of the book, but she climbs this mountain to get a prophecy of when she's going to die, and so the gods tell her the exact day she is going to die. And when that day approaches, this magic wizard man approaches her and says, I can keep you from dying today, but you now will be my slave. And she has to do anything that he asks her to do, which displeases the gods greatly. I am so psyched about this one. The sequel is coming out this year, or it has already come out this year. I believe it's coming out this year, and I've had my eye on this cover for so long, and I'm really psyched to be picking it up. Please say I don't get to the end of this year and this book is still on my unreads. Next, I have The Desert Prince and the Skull Throne by Peter V. Brett. This is the book that if I get to the end of this year and I haven't read it, I think I would be the most understanding, because it is the 4th book in a series of which I do not own book 1, 2, or 3. This is set in a world called the Demon Cycle, and it is about, I actually don't know what this one is about. I'm not gonna read that summary. It's the 4th book. What am I thinking? Anyways, The Desert Prince is a spin-off in the same realm. And once again, I haven't really looked into it, but I am so excited to be reading these books. I believe that I'm really, really going to like them. And I found this one really cheaply used at a thrift bookstore, so I picked it up because I had already bought this one, also very cheap in a thrift store. Next we have volume 1, 2, and 3 of the Skyward graphic novels. I was given these as a gift and I'm so excited to be reading them. So Skyward takes place in a world where the gravity has decreased, and because of this, people have adapted by basically learning how to fly. There are also giant floating insects. From reading the backs of the books, I cannot figure out what the plot is going to be, but that alone sounds fantastic, and I'm really excited because I think that the art style looks really good and like something that I am really going to enjoy. Next, I have The Sunderlands, which was another TikTok purchase. This is a dark fae book. I picked this one up because I am very interested in trying out some more dark fantasy romance and seeing how I feel about it, but I have since heard from the author that the darkness really doesn't start until book 2, and that I'm probably going to love the love interest in book 2 more so than in this book. So because of hearing those things, I feel like I've been putting this one on the back burner because I'm like, oh, I have to read a whole entire book to get to a book that I'm going to care about. I have heard it compared to ACOTAR, but pretty much any fae book you read about online you're going to hear compared to ACOTAR, so I really don't put any grain of salt into that comparison. And I believe that we are supposed to have a powerful female in the main role of this story. I have She Who Became the Sun, which is a Mulan-esque retelling. So we have these two siblings, I believe, who are a boy and a girl, and they go and get their prophecy read at the beginning of the book, and the boy is told that he is going to ascend to greatness, and the girl is told that she is going to ascend to nothing. And then I believe it's like on the brink of war, the boy is killed, and so our girl takes his place and I believe pretends to be him, leads the army into greatness. I'm so psyched about this one. I've heard such good things about it. I've heard that it is very queer and has lots of representation in it, and I love the idea of She Who Became the Sun being this kind of pun where she's becoming a son, S-O-N, a boy, versus like S-U-N. I think that's just fantastic. Next, I have The Nature of Witches, which has the absolute most gorgeous under the dust jacket that I have ever seen on a book before. So this is the story of witches in this world having magic connected to a certain element in a certain season of the year. So I don't know, for instance, but let's just say that everyone who can control water is most powerful during the summer. Our main character has the ability to control all elements, and so she is powerful all times of the year, and so she is trying to bring balance back to the world. I believe I read something about like, oh yes, in autumn, Clara wants nothing to do with her power. In winter, the world is on the precipice of disaster. In spring, she is falling for sang. In summer, Clara must choose between her power and her happiness. I believe it's also sapphic. I don't know for sure, but I believe that I've heard that before. Next, I have She Who Rides the Storm, which is about a group of characters who are trying to find this magical sword that is supposed to help stop some kind of problem that's coming, and so they have to go and undig this shapeshifter's grave, and it is said that if you dig up a shapeshifter, they will return and they will cause problems, and that they used to be a huge problem for society. It has multiple POVs, it is YA fantasy, and it is blurbed by Brandon Sanderson. Next, I have The Mime Order and the song Rising. I do have the dust jacket for The Mime Order, but I took it off when I was planning on reading it in December and then just haven't put it back on yet, nor have I started reading it yet. I'm honestly a little bit afraid to read it. This is the sequel and the third book in the Bone Season series. There are going to be 7 books. There are currently 4 out and I own the first 3. I have read book 1. We are following Paige, who is a clairvoyant, and she is arrested at the beginning of book 1 and sent away to this prison unit called Oxford, and there she starts to realize that the world is not how she thought, and she kind of starts to rebel against some of the things that she used to believe. Clairvoyancy basically means that she can either talk to, control, or interact somehow with ghosts, and we learn pretty quickly that Paige has a very rare type of clairvoyancy. I'm so excited to be continuing on with this series. I'm just a little bit nervous to be reading them because they were kind of tough and confusing books, at least the first one was, and I'm a little bit nervous to try and continue on with book 2 and 3 because I don't know if I'm like right in the mindset right now to be reading something where I have to focus heavily on what it's saying, but I do really want to read these, and all of my copies are used library editions, which I think is fantastic. So one day I would like to get my hands on book 4, and I'd really like it to be a used library copy if I could. Up next we have Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, first book in one of her series in the Elderling Along is the readathon that Becca's doing, but Elderling series. I haven't read any of the books so far, but I did try like a few chapters in the first book, Fool's Assassin, I believe is what it's called, and I wasn't absolutely in love with it, but I was pretty convinced that it had to do with the subject matter and our main character, so I decided that I wanted to skip that series for now and go into Ship of Magic. I don't really care if I get spoilers for the series, to be completely honest. I think that I'm just going to be way more interested in this subject matter, and it's going to give me an idea of how the world is and how her writing is, and once I read this trilogy, I do plan on eventually going back and reading the first trilogy, or continuing on and reading the dragon one and then go back, because she has 4 series in this world, and from what I've been able to understand, like this one and the other dragon one are kind of connected, and then the Fool's Fate and the Fool's Assassin, I don't even remember what the series, the Tawny Man and the Fools, anyways, those two are kind of connected. I'm much more interested in this because this one takes place at sea. It's about these boats built with this magical kind of wood, and if so many people from your family die on the deck of the ship, then it comes to life and it has a consciousness, and they're like much more powerful than regular ships. So I'm excited to be finding out if this is something that I really enjoy. I now have the Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell bind up. I didn't know you could buy this, but I found it used at a bookstore, and it has the entirety of the first book. There is only one book, but split into 3 books, and they are just paperbacks. They kind of all look like this, but different covers. I'm not going to take them out now because I'm afraid I won't be able to get them back in super easily. So Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is it takes place in England. It's about magic. I believe it's about a magic apprentice. The year is 1806. Centuries have passed since practical magic faded in England's past. There's a war coming, and the reclusive Mr. Norrell is forced to emerge as another magician. The young and handsome, daring Jonathan Strange are the last 2 forces in the war against France. I don't know if that came out how I wanted that to come out. Basically, I think it's going to be about teaching one of them is going to be teaching the other one about magic. My fingers are cold. It is chilly in here. Now I have Book 2 and Book 3 in the Age of Madness series, which are The Trouble with Peace and The Wisdom of Crowds. No, I do not own Book 1. No, I have not read Book 1. I have read The Blade itself, and I am currently in the middle of Before They Are Hanged. I am going to be finishing that up either today or tomorrow, depending on how much time I have today, and I'm so excited. The reason why I say that is because they're all written by Joe Abercrombie. I don't believe these series have any kind of connection to each other, but I will be buying Book 1 in this series, which I think it's called like A Bit of Madness, after I finish a book that comes after Before They're Hanged, which I can't remember which is the final book in that series, but I basically want to read the A Blade Itself trilogy, which is the First Law trilogy, and then I want to read Best Served Cold, and then I'm going to be picking up these books. I will be getting to these this year because I am really making a dent through Joe Abercrombie as we speak, and I'm loving it so much. But I bought these ones when Barnes & Noble had the hardback sale because I knew I was going to be reading them. I knew I was going to be loving them. So I might as well start picking up my Joe Abercrombie collection. Here I have the Song of Echoes. I was sent this book by the author in exchange for an honest review. He said as soon as I could get to it and read it that it would be fine. So I have it on my list of books that I really want to get to this year, but I just don't know when that's going to be happening. And since it is already published, he sent it to me after it was published. I don't count it as one of my arcs, but it is in the similar vein as a lot of arcs. This one I have read the first chapter of because I wanted to read it before I said yes or no to the author. It's been a while though. It's been at least 6 months since I did that. For 300 years, the people of the 5 realms have lived in relative peace, protected by their great leaders, the Archon. Yet far to the north of frozen lands beyond the Dregallen Trench, my laundry's done, the Dregallen Trench, the Ruick stir, driven by a rising evil long believed banished from the world. So I know we are following at least 2 POVs because I did get to read both of them when I started. Elodin is the High Lady, and she is worried about this danger that is coming to her land. And then Torian is a farm boy, and I believe we're going to have that age-old trope that I seem to really enjoy in fantasy, where you have a farm boy chosen one kind of an idea. So I didn't mean to necessarily do this, but we've gone through all my fantasy and horror, and now all that's left is my sci-fi physical books. So that's information in case you just want to know. First up, we have House of the Suns, and so this is the story of this powerful woman who, let me get the year right, 6 million years ago created thousands of clones of herself, and then she sent them out into the galaxy to live their lives. I believe that the clones are male and female, so they're not all just like exact replicas of herself. Now someone is hunting down and trying to kill all of the clones, and I'm guessing we're going to be following some of the clones as they're murdered and some as they're not, and trying to figure out what's going on and who's done it. I've been wanting to read Alastair Reynolds' book for a really long time now, and I thought this would be a good place to start because it is a standalone book, whereas a lot of his books are part of series, and I'm just not sure if I'm ready to invest in a huge series, a huge sci-fi series right now. Next, I have Velocity Weapon by Megan E. O'Keefe. I get this one mixed up a lot with The Last Watch, which I'll be talking about next, so give me one moment to figure out which is which. So Velocity Weapon is the one about the siblings where they get separated by time. One of them gets sent back in the past at kind of the beginning of the war, and one of them is kept in the present, and both of them are trying to investigate why this war started and what's going on and how they can stop it, and also how they can get back to each other. Whereas The Last Watch by J.S. Dews is about this woman who is like on the edge of the universe and finds out about this. The universe is now collapsing, and she, along with a ragtag team of people who basically are unwanted characters, have to try and either get back and let people know or try to stop the expanse. No, the opposite of the expanse. The crumble. The crumble. I'm thinking about the expanse, which is back here. Next, I have Children of Time and Children of Ruin, both by Adrian Tuchatsky, and along with that, I have Shards of Earth, also by the same author. I'll start with Shards of Earth because I know what this one is about pretty well. This is about a man who was created to be the best war machine, but now the war has ended and he doesn't really know what to do with himself, and he is considering starting up a war again so that he has a purpose in life. These two are about space exploration, and I believe humans trying to find a new place to live. And I know that there are multiple POVs, and that one of the POVs is these giant spider civilization people who I believe the humans are going to try to go to their world and try to live there and make it their own. So that is all of my unread physical TBR. Let's go into my unread audiobooks next. I'm having a hard time speaking. This is funny. So first up, I have Elantris, which I do own physically, but I don't plan on reading it this way, so I don't put it with my physical TBRs that haven't been read. It goes with the rest of my Sanderson collection. Elantris is Sanderson's, one of his standalone series that goes into the Cosmere. Actually, I guess it's the only standalone, because Warbreaker is not a standalone. I don't care how many people try to tell me that. He's writing a sequel. It's not a standalone. I don't know what Elantris is about, but the Cosmere is kind of this huge interconnected universe where all of Sanderson's adult fantasy works take place together. Next, I have The Emperor's Ruin, and I also have Skullsworn, but I technically DNF Skullsworn, so I don't count it on this list. But The Emperor's Ruin is Brian Staveley's next series in the Unhewn Throne world. So the first trilogy is called The Unhewn Throne, and we're following these three siblings, all the children of the Emperor, right after the Emperor's been killed, and it's kind of figuring out who's going to be next in line. By the end of the series, you figure out like who's in control, who's ruling, what's going on. Everyone's kind of found their place. And then he wrote the Ashes of the Unhewn Throne series. I don't know how many books there are going to be, but book 1 is out, and it is kind of about, well, you thought everything was wrapped up, but it's not quite. There are definitely some clues that happen in book 3 that lead you to believe that this book was going to be written. I'm just kind of nervous to pick it up, to be honest, because I feel like they're long and they're dark and they're heavy books, and I don't know if I'm really in the mindset right now where I want something like weighing on me while I'm reading it. But they're so good. I did rate book 1 and 2 5 stars, and then book 3 4 stars. I have Broken Web by Lori Lee. I did read the first book, which is called Forest of Souls, and I rated it 5 stars. It's one of the few YA fantasy books that I have rated 5 stars. I loved that book. The reason why I haven't gotten to this one yet is because I feel like it's been so long. It's been about 2 years since I read Forest of Souls that I really need to reread it in order to read book 2 and understand what's going on. But I'm so nervous to reread it that I'm not going to enjoy it as much. Like I said, I don't rate many YA fantasy books 5 stars, so I don't want to pick it up because I'm afraid I'm going to rate it lower, but I want to pick it up so I can read the sequel, and I'm nervous. Book 1 was about this magical realm where certain magic, I can't remember if it's all magic or just certain magic, connects you to an animal, and our main character, when her magic awakens, gets connected to her best friend who's a human, and they have to go and kill off this like spider king, or they have to fight a spider king off in the woods. There's lots of spiders in the book. I truly believe that our main character is asexual, and I do think that that's part of why I really enjoyed book 1, is just there's really not a romance in the book. It really is about two friends who are fighting for their lives and trying to figure things out and trying to figure out magic and everything, and it was just such an enjoyable book, but I am so freaking scared to try it out. I have The Inadequate Heir by Danielle L. Jensen. So she wrote the Bridge Kingdom duology. This book is the third book in that series, but the thing is the duology was about 2 characters and then it ends, and then the third book, and I don't know how many more, are going to be about different characters in the same world. Bridge Kingdom is a fantasy romance, enemies to lovers, smutty book. Don't really remember who we're following in this one, to be honest. I don't remember them from book 1, but I think it's like our main boy's sister. And in book 1, we're following this girl who was raised to be an assassin so that one day she could be married off to this king so that she could find out all his secrets and then kill him. I have the entirety of the Ormure Chronicles omnibus, which starts out with Heart of Mist, and I can't remember what the next 2 books in that series are called. I have technically read book 1, but I have not continued on with it, and when I saw that there was an omnibus online, I was like, oh, I need to buy this. Like, this sounds fantastic. I read this so long ago that I can remember nothing about this series, but I remember really enjoying book 1. So there's mist, and I think it kills people if you touch it. I think. I have the Storm of Echoes, which, yes, I do own the physical book for Storm of Echoes, but I plan on reading it with my audio, so I, again, think of it like an audio book. Storm of Echoes is Christelle Dabos's 4th book in the Mere Visitor Quartet. I just learned that it's not a quartet. I need to stop saying that. There are going to be 6 books in this series, and it is the one about Ophelia, who gets married off to this foreign realm where it is cold and it is dark and it is dangerous. I think it's like the South Pole, where she gets sent off to. And so Ophelia has these magical abilities. Lots of people in this land have magical abilities, and she can touch objects and read them, and she can walk through mirrors, and she is trying to figure out her place in this new world and trying to figure out where she belongs and is trying to stay alive. Next, I have Sephiroth's Hand, which I have started, and I made it about 5% through the book, and I had to put it down because I was actually reading The Eye of the Worlds at the time, and they were too similar for me, so I needed to set one down, and I just haven't been in the mood to pick it back up. But Sephiroth's Hand is about this prince of this realm, is basically becoming prince because all of his other brothers have died, and so he has been called back to the palace to be the prince of the realm. But this magic man thinks that thinks the prince has the ability to control this special kind of magic, so he sends his forces after him. The prince gets kidnapped and is forced into going off to see the magic man. There's also a second POV, but I don't remember what Trell had anything to do with the story, to be honest. I know that he had amnesia and can't remember anything from before 5 years ago, and he is off like right on the fronts of battle. And the magic system had to do with patterns, and I believe that every single person who uses magic has a different pattern, and there's something special about that. It was very confusing, and I was definitely going to need to focus heavily on it because the world is very complex, and I just wasn't ready to do that at the time. And then finally, my last audiobook that I own, which is funny because I have actually decided to DNF this one since picking it up. I'm about 40% through it and I was just way too lost to continue on, is The Emperor's Wolves. Spin-off prequel to this series that this author wrote previously. In this world, there are magical beings and they are all like very different from each other, and they're also humans. And there's this one capital city owned by this dragonborn king, and in this magical city, all of the different magical factions kind of butt heads with each other. So the magical king has built 3 different branches of his military. You have the Emperor's Hawks, the Emperor's Swords, and the Emperor's Wolves. We are following the head of the Emperor's Wolves, and they are the like assassin branch. They just go out and do whatever the king needs them to do. He needs to get a new recruit because a lot of his people like learn their skills and run off with the skills that they have. So he finds this random peasant boy who seems to have some special ability for a human and trains him to become the next Emperor's Wolf. Finally, let's talk about all of the arcs that I own going into 2022. I do have 13 of them, and so I'll be going through them as quickly as possible because I really don't know what most of these are about. First up, I have a book called Origins by Charlie Nottingham. I found her on TikTok. Her book sounded really, really good. It is like a fallen angel, new adult fantasy romance smutty book. She has a few different books in other series, all taking place in the same world, but this is the one I was most interested in. Next, I have Waking Ursa Minor. I thought the cover looked really good, and I remember when I read the summary online, I thought that it sounded really good, so I requested it and the publisher gave it to me. Next, I have The Liar's Knot, which is the sequel to, I put the first one back here somewhere, The Mask of Mirrors, which I read last year as an ARC and really, really loved, and so I requested the sequel and the publishers gave it to me. Technically, as of today, it is already out. I have not had time to get to it, unfortunately, but I'm really excited to be reading it as soon as I can. Next, I have The Kingless Crown. I requested this because I was just kind of in a funk and I felt like I wanted to try a few different things. I have actually started this book, so I can tell you a little bit of what it is about. This is a realm where this king took control of the realm, and in order to like punish all of the different nobles, they have to send their daughter, their like highest born daughter, to marry him. And so he gets either 4 or 5 daughters, which I believe they're like late teens, early 20s, to marry him, and it is about them, I believe, taking control from him. The bit that I did read, I was really, really into. It was just a matter of, oh my god, all my library books are coming up on their holds. I need to read those instead. I have The Pariah by Anthony Ryan, which has been out for a little bit now, but the publisher did give it to me after it had already come out, so I don't feel so bad not having it read already. I don't remember what this is about, and I don't remember why I requested it at this point, but I'm excited to read it and I will be picking it up soon. I've heard though that you should not read the summary for this book online because it spoils stuff that happens later in the book. I have The Jasmine Throne. This is a really old arc that I did start and I put down, and I just wasn't totally feeling it at the time, but I felt like it was a book that I really wanted to read at some point, so I figured when I do read it, I'll review it honestly. So this is about 2 women. One is like the queen. I believe she's like the sister to the king. I don't know exactly what title she gets then. And then one is like her handmaid, not at the beginning of the book, but eventually to be her handmaid. And they are sent off into, what's the word when you're sent off far away? It's not escapism. It's not banished. She is banished, but that's not the word I'm wanting. So let's just go with it because I can't think of the freaking word I want right now. So she is banished, and I believe it is about the 2 of them meeting each other in banishment and then finding out that they're both lesbians and that they love each other and that they want to rebel against the king of the realm. Next, I have The Justice of Kings. Once again, I can't remember what this one is about, but I know that this cover excites me every single time I see it. Next up, I have Age of Ash by Daniel Abrams. I requested this one specifically because Daniel Abrams is one of the halves of James S.A. Corey. So James S.A. Corey is a pen name for 2 different authors, and Daniel Abrams actually helped work with George R.R. Martin on some of the Game of Thrones stuff. I don't know exactly in what context or what extent that he did, but I have read a bunch of his sci-fi and really, really enjoyed it, and I've read Game of Thrones and really enjoyed it, so I figured I'd pick up his fantasy when it was coming out. He has written a few other fantasy books already, but I haven't been able to read any of them yet, so when I saw this one online and the publisher was offering it to me, I was like, heck yes, I want to read this book. I have The Goblin Emperor, which was already published and then it was republished last year. I don't know if it was because the publisher republished bought it or like what happened with it. I believe that it's about like a goblin son to the emperor, and he is kind of seen as lesser than, but he is in line to become the emperor, so he has to prove himself, something like that. I've heard great things about it though. I have Son of the Storm, which has been out for a really, really, really long time, and I'm just so nervous to pick it up because I'm afraid that I'm gonna get like really bored in it, because I think it's like more of a slower book. But it is about this man who is like a magic librarian, and all he wants to do is stay and read and not have like some great adventure. So I'm assuming he's going to be sent off on some great adventure. I have The Blood Trials, which is a YA fantasy. I think it's like a YA dystopian actually, more so. And it has the word trial in the title. Why would I not want to read that? I have Relic and Ruin, which I believe is a smutty fantasy romance book. Yeah, it's called The Banshee and the Wraith. They have the power to save the world or destroy it. I know that there's going to be necromancers, and I know it's going to be really, really dark. And then finally, my last arc that I have at this moment is Wake the Bones. So our main character is a taxidermist, and she is also a tobacco field hand. And I believe it's about trying to find her way in society. She's just dropped out of college. She doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life. Her mom died a long time ago, and so she kind of feels like lost in this world. I'm hoping that it's going to be like really weird and really eerie and really dark. Those are all of the books that I own going into 2022. As I've already said, I've started and finished and DNF'd some of them already because that's just kind of what I do 15 days into a year. But I'm hoping that most of these books will have been read or finished before the end of the year, and that I can go into 2023 with almost none of these unread on my shelf, if not all of them being completely finished. Let me know down below if any of them really excite you, which ones you're looking forward to most, which ones you think I should pick up next. I will be playing TBR Bingo next week. If you are super adamant about one of them, I might just try to make it work. It's on TBRopoly now, it's not Bingo, but I'll try to make it work in my TBR game if I can. I want to thank you all for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. I don't remember how my outro goes, but until then, I will talk to you in the comments. Bye!